Welcome, AI Explorers, to another episode of our AI exploration. And I'm here again with my brother. We're going to talk a little bit about AI in education. So, Jacob, you want to start us off with the conversation, what we're looking at and thinking about today?
Yeah, so for me, artificial intelligence in education has been just fascinating to consider and look at. And you know, and probably some of our viewers know, I've been living in Spain since September of last year. It's something we decided to do as a family is move to Spain. And my children aren't entirely fluent in Spanish yet. And so I have been using artificial intelligence to help my children with education from the beginning. Because sometimes they'll just say, hey, Dad, help me out with this homework. I'm fluent in Spanish and I can help them. But, you know, I never went to school in Spanish. And there are so many things that I don't know what they mean, like math terms, you know, because I learned Spanish as a missionary and then honed it some as an immigration lawyer. But when it comes to different vocabulary, there are things that I don't know, right?
Yeah, outside of your realm.
Using ChatGPT to take a picture of a textbook and say, help me figure this out. And it doesn't, I never ask it to like do my kids' homework for them, right? Like I always ask it, hey, help me figure this out. How can we work on this problem? And I think that's the key. I think it's actually helped them learn very well because it does not, when I give it that instruction, it does not learn, it doesn't do it for them. It prompts them to learn better. It prompts them to learn more. And so that's been, AI has been an educational lifesaver for me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to start with that.
On my part, I would say that it has helped me to learn better things that, you know, I've learned in the past but didn't really absorb. And like I tell a lot of people, the copywriters that I've previously worked with, they're the ones who have taught me the English language. And ChatGPT is helping me refine that even now, because it helps me to understand why it's written this way, because it has that understanding underlying the entire programming of it. So what other things in education are you experiencing with ChatGPT or any other AI platform for that matter?
So one of the other sides of this is the language learning, because it's urgent for us. It's important for our kids to learn Spanish right now. And so, you know, we've played with Duolingo, but one of its shortcomings is the inability to have a conversation. And so I've been working on a GPT that can gauge your level of Spanish understanding and have a conversation with you in Spanish.
That's awesome.
And so you can turn on the chat mode on your phone and then actually talk to it. And we did it, and Tyrus had a very short conversation with ChatGPT the other day. Pretty much it asked him, how are you? And he was like, good. And then that was pretty much it. But it was funny. Like it asked him, how much do you know? And it asked him to speak some in Spanish. And it was cool to see it go back and forth between English and Spanish. So we see some applications and we see some uses. But what I think was really cool was just the scope of human learning and the capability of ChatGPT. I don't know if you're ready to share your chat yet or not.
Oh, yeah.
The coolest thing.
Let's dive into that real quick. As we were preparing for this discussion, reading some articles and news about AI in education and learning spaces, I was considering what the breadth of human knowledge was. Some of the questions or thoughts posed inside of these articles prompted me to think about this. And the Library of Alexandria was considered, you know, the pinnacle of human knowledge at its time. And I wanted to see a comparison of what the Library of Alexandria was versus what the internet is versus what ChatGPT knows. And so I gave it this simple prompt. I gave it some specifications, make that comparison between those three things, provide a markdown table. It did, but not in the way that I wanted it. And I'll show you how I changed that in a moment. And then provide a brief response or explain what your thinking is on this. So of course it did this, and then it gave me a nice brief about the Library of Alexandria, and then the internet, and then ChatGPT. And we're happy to share this. You can pause the video and read through some of these things to see that. But I wanted the markdown table to be better, so I said, please display the markdown table more visually, easier to read, without scrolling or human parsing, and not in a code block. And of course, it created our preferred style.
And I want to jump in here and say, like, this is an excellent use case of how to use ChatGPT, in that you finagle it a little. Like sometimes it may behave in a way that you don't expect or want, but if you give it more specificity, it tends to give you exactly what you want. But anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. All right, so here we have the time period, and it shows those time periods, and I love the way it broke down this information, because it said estimated volume of information, hundreds of thousands of scrolls, and then exabytes, billions of gigabytes. I don't recall hearing exabytes as a term yet, but fascinating.
Billions
and then
of gigabytes. There it is.
Yes. Hundreds of billions of parameters. So we can see the variation in levels of knowledge here. So hundreds of thousands of scrolls, that doesn't really give us a really refined what that is in gigabytes to make a true comparison. And I'll show you in a moment the prompt to get it to make an estimation of what that is. And then we can see that 100 billion parameters. So not the gigabyte level of the internet. So obviously ChatGPT doesn't have access to every breadth of human knowledge available.
Right. Impossible for it to do that.
Right. And maybe at some point it will, as data storage becomes more and more refined and smaller and more compatible.
It's still happening, right?
Oh, yeah, it's still happening.
I'm kind of wishing that I could see the Library of Alexandria. Can you imagine hundreds of thousands of scrolls and books? That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do a Midjourney prompt for the Library of Alexandria now. Oh, of course you are. So, we have the papyrus. So we have the types of information, scrolls, text, images, video, audio, databases, and then ChatGPT, text-based data from books, websites, and other texts. So that's an interesting distinction. It says just text-based data for ChatGPT. And this is ChatGPT telling me this information. And then accessibility.
So is it not considering Dalle at all? Because I imagine Dalle is trained on images, not just text.
I'm guessing it's just focusing on itself, because I asked, my prompt was just ChatGPT. I guess if I had included Dalle, it might have done something different. Mm-hmm. And then the accessibility, obviously, there's a process of accessibility. The Library of Alexandria was related to its location, where the internet is open to everybody that has a connection and a device that can connect. And then the final things, preservation. The internet is continuously backed up, where the Library of Alexandria was overrun and destroyed. I love the language diversity row that it provides here. It was primarily in Greek. We're looking at virtually all languages on the internet, and then ChatGPT is primarily in English. And we'll see that change, I think, over time. I know that a number of languages are used in that, but coding generally is the purview of the English business. Is it?
So
is that
I want to talk about this. I want to interject. So the other day,
go ahead.
We went to they do lunches here in school where you eat lunch with your kid, and they'll invite you, and it was kind of this special lunch thing. So we were sitting at this table with Tyrus and this other family and their son, and they were from Finland. So we sat down, and Tanya and I are speaking Spanish, and then they're like, English? We're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then we talked in English for the hour, but they were from Finland, and the other dad was a computer programmer. And I said, oh, what do you think about ChatGPT and AI and all that stuff? And he said,
fascinating.
He's not that impressed. And I was like, why are you not that impressed? And he goes, well, when it comes to Finnish, because she also translates for EA, right, of all companies. And
interesting.
Yeah, super cool. They were a neat couple. But she was all like, she does localization translation to Finland. And so I was like, oh, well, what about ChatGPT? Like eliminating your job, right? Essentially, And she's like, well, the translations aren't that good. And I'm like, the translations it does to Spanish are pretty rocking, They're really good. But apparently to Finnish, not so good. And I had asked ChatGPT previously, what languages do you consider yourself proficient in? And Finnish wasn't on the list, as I recall, right? It was like English, Spanish. And both of them mentioned that ChatGPT, when it translates English to Finnish, they're like, it's Finnish, but it sounds like it was in English first. Like it sounds like a translation. And I thought, that's fascinating. And so this language diversity column, when it popped up in your response here, and I saw that, I was like, yeah, ChatGPT is primarily English. And so OpenAI has to be thinking about that as how do we get a team together to boost the Spanish language component or the or frankly, even just the international like English localizations. Like, is it better at American English than British English? And so just no, I'm serious.
There is a distinction. There is a distinction. That's true.
There's a bigger difference than you'd think. And so like when it comes to Spanish or Greek or French or German or any of these other languages, like I have viewed ChatGPT as a miracle translator, but that's because I work in English and Spanish, two of the most common languages to this model probably. And so I just wonder.
And to the world.
And to the world. And so it's interesting to see how that will develop when it comes to ChatGPT.
It reminded me, I think we spoke about language early on, but 18 point, according to the CIA data, 18.8% of the world speaks English, 13.8% speaks Mandarin Chinese, 7.5 speak Hindi, and 6.9 speak Spanish. So I wonder what ChatGPT's Chinese and Hindi looks like with that in thought.
Here, I'm gonna take us on a quick tangent. This is what Midjourney thinks the Library of Alexandria looks like. I don't think it got it. I don't. No. Those aren't scrolls. Those are just straight up books.
Those looks like a very Romanesque library in.
What can you do?
In England. So continue on with their education. So I was like, what does hundreds of thousands of scrolls translate to in gigabytes? And so it gives me this thing where it talks about the length of a scroll and what it believes the estimate is, 100,000 words, and then what is the words to bytes, 6 bytes per word, or 6, yeah. And then calculation basis, 1,000 words per scroll times 6 words per bytes, and then it gives us this. And it runs that down. It would translate to approximately 111 gigabytes of information stored at the Library of Alexandria. When you look at that as a comparison about the breadth of human knowledge today, it's fascinating. So that was a tangent thought that I had while I was reading about education and artificial intelligence. But let's dive further into what artificial intelligence and education is going to look like in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a cool topic, and I liked your chat, that conversation that you shared with me and all of us, because I think it's a cool introduction to like how much learning was out there, how much learning we had with the internet, right? And then how much learning are we going to have with artificial intelligence? Or is it going to destroy everything? Which I think is one of the big concerns that people have is, oh no, artificial intelligence is going to undermine it all. And you and I have read a couple of articles, but I want to start with this one concept. It mentions that a student comes to their professor, computer science student, and says, hey, look, is ChatGPT going to destroy everything for me? Like I spent years learning how to code and now it's useless. Like ChatGPT can code faster and better than I can. Right? Which that requires a lot of self-awareness for a person to say. But what are your thoughts on that for somebody who says, you know, now that I got good at something, was that a waste of time?
Well, I have to disagree with that because the ChatGPT was created by humans, coders, obviously very smart, intelligent people who've put this together. So they're still going to need that, and that's going to be required throughout to make the backbone, the spine of this support system. And so those individuals who focus on that, and that's where I think part of that brought up to me was the same thing. Like, I don't know law. That's not my focus. You know law. That's your focus. And so what does that look like? We all kind of have to specialize. And if we specialize right now, especially as we're looking at these new times, the new era of AI, what can we specialize in? And it's just going to take a different turn for anybody learning something new now. It's going to be different jobs 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And it always is different jobs. Now, obviously, certain jobs are always going to be important. Trade jobs, for example. I'm a big advocate for trade jobs, and our brother is in electricity, does his thing, and I think those people are going to be pivotal. So if coding isn't something that you're interested in, find a different path. There's going to be so many paths, and the opportunities to learn so many different things now is going to be astronomical.
Yeah, I think I think the light at the end of the tunnel, if you consider this a tunnel at all, is that opportunities will open, right? So let's take the utopian vision and say robots do all of the manual labor and do all of the labor at all. Well, you have time for hobbies. Like, you can pursue things you're interested in, right? Like, let's say the utopian vision comes to life. But let's say that it doesn't, right? And let's say that you still have to work day to day to survive and to have an income and those kinds of things. I think you're absolutely right in that you're going to have to get good at something. Like, specialized skill sets are going to matter a great deal. And I don't think that artificial intelligence will replace you so much as it will enhance you. And so for learners and students, I still think learning is very important. I still think formal education is very important because it's going to give you the skills. And I guess this is probably the larger question, which is, how do we incorporate artificial intelligence into learning so that people are ready to use the tool in the right way?
Well, it goes back to how we've used it with our own work. For me, it is a super supportive and assistive technology. It helps me create better stuff quicker. And I think the same will hold true for those learning, for students, for teachers, excuse me. And we're going to see that really open up because it is a fantastic support for things. It can analyze information and help understand your method of learning and help you become better at, excuse me, better at learning. So it will help you find that path to learn in a pace and a style that helps you to succeed, rather than the same throw everybody in a box, have a teacher in front of 30 students trying to explain math, and 3 kids automatically get it because they're just innately born to that, where the rest are kind of glazed over and they're like, I don't understand that concept, where they could ask the AI, what does this mean? And then they don't have certain things, they don't have peers making fun of them. They have an AI just responding without any form of shame or guilt to ask those questions.
Right. That was one of the things that I liked about this as well. And I like the idea of being able to essentially train a model on your lecture or on your subject matter. And yeah, because sometimes it can be embarrassing to raise your hand and ask a question. As even in great environments, people will make comments or jokes. I mean, I remember one time in a class, I was sitting next to this girl and the professor was talking and he said the word erudite. And at the time I didn't know what it meant. And she leans over to me and she goes, this girl next to me, she goes, what does erudite mean? I immediately raise my hand and say, what does erudite mean? And then somebody quipped immediately, like, well, clearly you're not. And I'm all like, you jerk.
Ouch.
Right. And I was like, what the heck? I'm like, I wasn't even asking. I was asking for her. Right. No, but then, then I looked up the meaning and hated this person forever. But that's a different story. I'm kidding. No. So what happened was, in an AI realm, you can ask that question to the AI and you're not going to run into scenarios like that. And one of the thoughts that I had reading this was, how cool would it be to have a model based on a professor and to have like pre-programmed responses to different questions. And so if a student had trouble with the homework, I mean, you could essentially, I could envision a world where your lecture is recorded, that data gets loaded into a model, and then when students have questions about that material at home, they could go to the model based on the lecture from that day and ask, hey, can you expound on this issue? And with the help of ChatGPT, modeled on the professor's lecture and the material that's actually being taught. And then even expand on that. It's just so cool, the idea that those kinds of things can happen. And it takes away it takes away opportunities for bullying, for people saying things like, well, clearly you're not, and takes away embarrassing scenarios, I think, in a way that can enhance learning. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I think that there are a couple of people that I'm aware of that have set up something like that, where a coaching program where they fed it a number of samples of their coaching, and then they just unleashed it and said, you know what, you can ask it any kind of question that you would ask me, and it will respond kind of in kind. And so that's been fascinating to see that already starting to happen. I mean, myself, I fed information, my own writing samples into it. And so now whenever I ask ChatGPT to write something for me or help me write something, that it's focused more on writing like I do and the way that I do. And then it takes me less editing time, because there's no way that I'm letting anything slide just raw from ChatGPT. I have to edit it. I have to curate it because I'm the expert. I'm the one that has to look at it. And the same goes for students and teachers as they employ AI in their teaching methods and in their learning and in their assessments, either them being self-assessments or them assessing a class and finding new ways to assist their students.
So this is actually interesting. So we're talking about the learner perspective, but I think there's also a lot to be said for how AI can enhance the teacher's perspective as well. So one thing that I've been reading about is how good artificial intelligence is at training, just generally. Like it's excellent at training people. And so the opportunity for artificial intelligence to give you feedback on a lecture or to give you feedback on a lesson, or to plan out, like when I was making that Better Negotiator GPT that's available in the store, one of the things that it does is it allows you to role play a negotiation. And so the opportunity to role play a negotiation has actually already been very helpful to me. And so what about the opportunity to role play a class, or to role play a lecture, or to role play a response to a specific question? Like ChatGPT could pretend to be a student of a certain grade level, of a certain age, of a certain capacity. Like you could say, you're an F student in my class and I teach math. How can I best help you? You know, and like, and it can tell you like, no, that explanation doesn't work. From the learner perspective, when I'm trying to get ChatGPT to teach me like code or something else, I'll frequently say, yeah, I don't know what that means. Can you explain it to me in an easier way? And it'll instantly modify, and then I get it. And it's just been very interesting to learn. And it's been very natural to learn with the help of ChatGPT.
Well, that's one of the fantastic things about it. It's the ease at which you can get into using this technology to help you learn. It in and of itself, prompting it with natural language, you are already learning so many fascinating things.
Let me ask you a question, and I already know the answer, but it's going to spur a bit of conversation.
Okay.
So a lot of teachers, their first gut reaction, let me back up even further, right? Like in middle school, I was told I would write all of my papers in cursive handwriting, and that I wouldn't have a calculator with me everywhere I went, right? And a lot of us heard stuff like this, and yet here I have a smartphone and I type everything, right? Now, does that mean cursive handwriting is lame and that you shouldn't learn how to do math? Absolutely not. But I think it would be the wrong response to say, well, we should ban AI from the classrooms. Like, I think smart teachers
completely agree with that statement.
Smart teachers who are looking forward, they know that this is here and it's not going away. So the question isn't whether or not we allow artificial intelligence in our classroom. The question is, how are we going to use artificial intelligence in our classroom? What do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that statement. I think it is short-sighted to ban this type of technology from your classroom, because just like the calculator or just like the computer, you know, these things just enhance our ability to accomplish tasks. So even in some of these articles that are around educating, they've said these things complement and help you enhance your efforts to learn. So I think AI is going to be a powerful tool in both educators' hands and students' hands to help them learn more efficiently, more easily, and in a method that best serves them, because we all learn differently. I learn one way, you learn a different way. And so having this tool to help us refine our learning process is going to be fantastic. It's being transformational. Beyond that, look at how transformational AI in just 2 years, this generative AI
Yeah.
has been in just 2 years to workflows, to jobs in all sectors, and what that's going to look like exponentially as AI improves and gets better and becomes a ubiquitous part of work, life, and play even. So
Yeah.
I think you're ignoring it at your peril. Now is the time to jump on it, learn
Completely
it,
agree.
use it, and benefit from it.
So one of the things though that I think is probably the most reasonable concern is how students use it, which is if I just use it, if I'm a student and I just use it to write a paper, which by the way, ChatGPT is totally capable of doing, I don't develop the critical thinking skills necessary to put complex ideas together. And writing, and you and I are both highly educated. You've got an MBA, I've got a JD, right? And so we know from personal experience that writing, even though it can be a little painstaking at times, helps you put ideas together. But one of the things that has occurred to me also is prior to law school, I took a logic class, and that also teaches you to put ideas together. And so I kind of wonder if there isn't a space for us to say, all right, well, maybe writing isn't as necessary as it once was, but maybe there's an opportunity to look at the larger building blocks of an argument. So I think teaching logic probably becomes a lot more important.
Oh yeah.
There was a great video yesterday that I saw about ChatGPT. This person asked it, if you have 3 towels on a line and it takes them 3 hours to dry, how long does it take 9 towels to dry? And ChatGPT goes, well, if it takes 3 towels, 3 hours to dry on a line, 9 hours is what it would take to dry 9 towels on the line, right? It didn't get it, right? And so
Yeah.
ChatGPT is only good at some kinds of logic in its current state. But I think there's an opportunity. I don't think that you should tell children that they don't have to write papers. Like, I think that's definitely a part of building critical thinking skills. And I think it should remain a staple of educational foundation. Like, you should learn how to write. But
Okay.
I think building logical arguments is a bigger, more important part. What are you going to say?
And I agree with building logical arguments is very important. But it's funny you say ChatGPT did that, but I dare you to take that question to the person on the street and see what answers you're going to get, because they're going to be wide and varied, and they're going to be just as insane or
Right.
non-logical thought involved, that you'll get similar responses.
Right. So some people will stop and be like, wait a second, what? And some people
Right.
will absolutely say 9, right? And some people will say, well, 3, because that's how long it takes a towel to dry.
Exactly. But, you've got, and this is me just thinking in my head, what is that line doing? Is it running the towel through a drying machine? And so it takes 1 hour to sit in that drying machine. So, yes, it would take 9 hours to dry 9 towels if you were running it on a machine. Now, if you have it in your backyard on a hot summer Georgia day, it's going to take 30 minutes.
Georgia's humid, man. It's going to take longer than 30 minutes. To go to Arizona or something, take 10 minutes and
Okay.
we're done.
Drop the humidity out. Yeah, all right. Fair.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to think about the ways. So first of all, there's the caution. I think even though ChatGPT can do so much, everybody who uses it should do so cautiously and with the complete knowledge that it can be confidently so very wrong.
Yes.
But that's not an excuse for not beginning to adopt it, for not beginning to learn how to use it. And then I have learned that, especially when it comes to, and this goes back to the subject matter thing, to things that I'm already an expert on, that I know when it's making crap up, and I can quickly fix it and transition and say, no. I need you to write it this way or that way, and I need to make sure you cite your sources. And then now that it has web enabled, I can actually track down those sources. I can be like, give me the citation for that. And so there are a lot of important ways that you can use ChatGPT even now, but in the future, it's going to be even more correct. It's going to hallucinate a lot less. It's going to be a fascinating future. And ChatGPT really is, it's like the DOS version of this. You know what I mean? Like for those of you who, I'm
I like that
serious.
analogy. That's fantastic.
Like when you used a computer back in the day, it was just one line with a flashing cursor, and
Yeah.
like that's where we're at with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. Like I fully
Oh,
expect it to be way more complex, probably in a very
for
short period of
sure.
time, but definitely in 10 years it's going to be nuts.
Yeah, it's basically Pong on an Atari.
Right. I mean, I bet you could get it to program Pong for you.
Oh, it probably could. That's really small.
We should make that
But
video. We'll do that video next, bro.
that'll be
ChatGPT
fantastic.
creates Pong in 5 minutes.
But I think you're totally spot on. I think the thing is you have to curate this right now, especially as it's doing its hallucinations, the so-called errors that it creates, where it's very convinced that it's right. But and that's what I tell everyone that I speak to about AI is you as the expert must use and review and vet this content. But I think for students and educators, it's going to be a very great supportive tool and help curate the learning experience and personalize it to both the teachers and the students as they move forward using this tool.
So I think as we round out our conversation, there's one point that I want to make, which is critical thinking is the important piece here, right? Like
Right.
that is the skill that needs to be developed, especially when we think about writing. Or even when it comes to art, right? Like when you think about Midjourney and you need to be able to think critically about the image you're looking at, which is also very important. Critical thinking skills are the important thing. Like when you ask a sixth grader to write a paper, you don't want to get a paper, right? like that's not the end goal. The goal of asking a sixth grader to write a paper is to help them develop critical thinking skills, right?
Right.
And frankly, that's the way it is until you get to publishing, law review articles or peer-reviewed papers or those kinds of things. All you're doing is developing critical thinking skills. And so we need to make sure that we find a way to do that. And I imagine that as different things, different technologies came about, and in fact, I actually read about this. When the printing press came out, people were like, no one will ever remember stories anymore, as if that's a terrible thing. And now reading is a foundation of what we do, And so this is a new technology. And for us to say, well, it can write better than I can, so why should I write? And no one will ever develop critical thinking skills. None of those things are true. It's just a future that we don't know what it looks like yet. But we need to find the way to integrate artificial intelligence responsibly so that the end goal isn't for sixth graders to be able to write 5-paragraph papers. The end goal is for sixth graders to be able to think critically. How do we do that? And I think if we can answer that question, then we can figure out how to use artificial intelligence in any environment.
Yeah, and I think that is the crux of the argument for AI right now. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, that was it. That's all I
That was
had.
it? Okay, fantastic.
Cool, man.
Well, thank you, AI Explorers. We're excited to share continued areas where this can be implemented and used in your lives, be it work, learning, or play. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode.